two final points that help sum up our approach to chamber music and this piece especially. One is that I think there's a really good analogy between what we do, and if anybody has been on a sports team, they understand that just learning the individual skills to be able to contribute to the whole thing is incredibly important, and you have to do it. If you're on a basketball team, you have to be able to free throw. But you also have to be able to pass, and just throwing the ball against the wall doesn't teach you that. You actually have to be in the room with somebody else, and you have to pass it back and forth to understand how that whole thing is going to work. Music is no different. In order to play a piece like Third Construction, if the four of us all just learned our individual parts perfectly over months of practice and then got into the room and ran it from beginning to end, it would not be the same thing as if we had been in that process together for the entire time that we've been working on it. A lot of times, actually, our first 2 rehearsals of a brand new piece will be all together, maybe before anybody's even learned a note. And one rehearsal will be just sitting down with the scores, always with coffee, because everybody's mentioned that, sitting down with the scores, not even with the instruments, and already making some decisions up front about leading and following, about cueing, about, all kinds of different musical issues. And then another rehearsal actually at the instruments, but all together. And maybe we can't play all of our lines and all of our parts perfectly, but we're already from the very beginning starting to reach a consensus or starting to get ideas as a group, not just as individuals, about how the piece is going to progress. Because as you practice only by yourself for a long time, you develop so many ideas about how you think it sounds and how you think it is. And if you're too separate in doing that, you may have a harder time later coming back together and trying to make it gel into one thing. But I think sports teams work exactly the same way. If everybody just learned their own individual skills and then showed up on the day of the game to play, just because they all had gotten good at the individual skills doesn't mean they'd be able to play really well as a team. I think the other point that's really important from our point of view is to make sure that you look at and listen to lots of different types of musical groups to understand about how communication between musicians is done and how it's important. Not only percussion ensembles, some of our models early on actually were string quartets. We watched how people who played these much smaller instruments would sit close to each other in a little arc or a little row or something, and the way that they would shift their attention back and forth to each other, maybe even lean into each other a little bit in order to communicate intention about music, was really instructive for us. It was really important in developing a concept of what it means to play as a group. And also really great jazz groups or rock groups or any kind of really great improvisational musicians, none of them ever just sit still and ignore each other. They all use the space and the energy around and between them to communicate musical ideas back and forth. When we're playing music off of a score, off of a page, there's something really wonderful about doing that because you're taking something from a tradition and a history and you're playing it. But we've got to remember that we're also playing in space and that we have to interact with each other and trade energy back and forth. And lots of different kinds of musicians can serve as a model for you to learn how to do that.